Hi, I'm Tom Burgess, and thank you for listening to the Weekly Wake Up, where we raise the alarm on what's really happening in our country. And after another turbulent week, I'm not sure anybody knows. Anyway, this show is part of the Real Agenda network of podcasts for political change. Now, today we're going to be talking about some of the things that have been happening this week. And also we're just going to talk about housing and homelessness, which is an ongoing, very important issue. But first, I'd like to introduce the team. I'm very pleased to welcome Satya. How are you doing?
I am the team, Tom.
You are the team. The thing is, we picked a team of people to do this show that are all these high-flying executives, isn't it, really? And
they've
always
apart
got
from us, Tom. We're not high-flying executives.
Well, we were high-flying executives. But
a long time ago.
We've stopped flying. And then we've got, Hugh is still just moved into his house, and so a lot to do there. We can understand that. But anyway, and also our new recruit, Zoe, is in the States somewhere, so she should be back next week. So that's good. So we thought we'd still carry on with the show and we'd just have a chat about things.
Yeah, the show never stops.
Had a nice comment from a listener who said this was an excellent show to listen on her commute. The new show that we're doing, the new show for Taxpayers Against Poverty, called Hungry, Homeless and Powerless. And that's just went out this week.
Yeah, I'm really envious of that. I wish somebody would say that about our show, Tom.
Well, they have.
Have they?
There's been plenty of people that have said about the Weekly Wake Up.
They have.
You can now subscribe just to the Weekly Wake Up if you don't want all the other Real Agenda shows. But before we get into our little fireside chat, Satya, just to remind everybody that we're always looking for new people on the team and whether to help with content production or marketing. So contact us now if you'd like to get involved, and also let us know what you think about the Real Agenda. And the email address is info@realagenda.org. What should we talk about today, Satya?
We can't go on with the show without mentioning what's happening in Parliament at the moment.
The court case was very interesting. It is sort of democracy in action. It's ridiculous that we have to go to such lengths to get democracy in action, but at least Parliament's back on the case.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just so shocked that Boris and his mates thought that they could get away with doing what they did by using this thing of prorogation.
Yeah.
Because you can do that. That's absolutely legal. But it has to be in the right context. You can't just take something that is acceptable within our British Constitution and then mess with it, which is what they did.
It was always a bit suspicious because the argument had been given, well, we need to, this Parliament's been going on for a long time and we need to take a break and plan a new Queen's speech. Well, it doesn't take like 6 weeks to prepare a Queen's speech. You can actually do that, and hopefully they've been given some thought about what their actual agenda would be. It was always a bit shifty.
Well, really, I mean, anybody with half a brain could see that it was a lie. They were using the prorogation.
Yeah, you've got to get it right.
I can never say it.
I think rogue is the operative part of the word.
Rogue. Yeah, rogue. That issue to really, for their own political gain, to get what they want, really silence Parliament so that they won't be able to question Boris. That's ridiculous.
Sometimes you don't know where to start, lost for words, and everyone's got a view on it. But overall, I think it's important to follow the science, like keep calm and carry on and not get too excited that, we've beaten these people or we've won that. I think we have to be level-headed about this. And I think there's been one or two, certainly members of Parliament that have been like that and have made the case quite clearly. And some that are just obsessed with attacking everybody else. Let's work together to solve the mess that we are in. We could go back and say, well, why are we in this mess? But this is where we are. We've got to sort it out from here.
Oh, you're far too kind, Tom. Far too kind. I think, the very people who we as the people think that they're going to protect us and our Constitution and the sanctity of the British Constitution are the very people who are abusing it. And I think that, deserves the criticism that it gets, because this should never, ever, ever, ever happen again. The only way it won't happen again is if everybody shows their discontent about it.
Yeah. This does shift us maybe towards more of a written constitution for the future, and we should consider that. I think also our voting system means that we're not proportionally represented in Parliament. I think a positive side is that the tribal nature of our party politics is sort of breaking up, and I actually think that's a good thing. Sort of shifting on to the party conferences. So we've had the Liberal Democrat conference and the Labour Party conference this week. I'm not being very impressed with either of those two parties so far in what they've said, and you think, heaven help us, if this is the opposition and they're going to form a government, then I don't know what we're going to do.
It seems to me there's nobody around at the moment who can really put a stop to what's going on. There's too much, as you say, tribalism, tribal warfare that's going on everywhere. And everybody's really just, all they're doing is attacking each other rather than saying, hang on a minute, this is what we stand for. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to bring the country together. And that's the most important thing.
Either way it happens, we've got to get through it. But unless we solve the issues of poverty, the poor wages, unaffordable housing, it's not going to make a lot of difference.
Well, at the moment, nobody is talking about the real agenda. Nobody's talking about the real issue.
Oh, no,
Brexit
that's right.
is the only thing that everyone's talking about, but they're not talking about in terms of let's all get together and solve this as a country, make it or non-partisan, but actually try and get together. And because we as a country have to get out of this now, we're becoming a laughing stock. It's ridiculous.
There was a reporter they were talking to a trade union leader, and they were trying to push him which side of the divide he was. And he, in my view, quite rightly said, it's about the real people. It's about their jobs, their income, their housing. These are the real issues. We want to get on with sorting those out. And I actually think he's right.
Yeah, we're in a very, very difficult position because on the one hand, we have all these real issues that we need to be solving within the country. But on the other hand, we can't really make any decisions, medium or long-term decisions about any of these things unless we know whether we're going to be in or out.
Well, why can't we decide to increase the minimum wage? Why can't we decide to change the tax system for our poorest who get charged loads of taxes when they've got no money?
Well, apparently Boris is trying to do that, isn't he? Decrease taxes, lower taxes for the rich.
Exactly.
That's going to really help us, of course.
Seeing there's only two of us here today, we don't actually want to deteriorate into just, oh, well, that's it. It's grim. It's grim.
At the moment, but the politics in this country is very grim. But we do need to move forward from that.
The positive side to all this and how it affects the real agenda is that hopefully rising from the ashes, and we will build something good out of this and we will come together, but it needs leadership and we don't see that, do we?
Yeah. Having said everything that I've said so far, I have every faith in this country, absolutely every faith. And I think whatever happens, we will survive and we will survive well. And we will come out of this. We will come out of this better and stronger, whichever way we go.
So the other thing that was this week really was Greta and co. were saying their bit.
I mean, such an impressive young woman.
Indeed. I think it's great. You can get up and say those things and it makes people think. But she's doing it. I think it's a lesson to us all.
So impressed with her. I heard her do a TED talk, actually. She talked about when she was 11, was diagnosed with Asperger's. She became very ill and she wouldn't eat and she wouldn't speak. She named this syndrome that she had selective speech syndrome. And she said it meant that she only spoke when it was absolutely necessary. And she believes that this is the moment in terms of climate that it's very necessary for her to speak, and that's why she's speaking. And I'm thinking, that's impressive. If anybody hasn't heard Greta Thunberg's speech at the UN, just Google it and have a listen. It makes a huge impact. She tells the politicians there how it is, no holds barred, and she's very impressive.
Well, it's just come into my head, so I will say that. There was someone had posted on Facebook, about this wonderful multi-million-pound yacht that had pulled up in their harbour, and wasn't it a beautiful-looking thing? And I just thought that's interesting because, yes, they can be very beautiful, but what is the point of this multi-million-pound yacht and this guy, this guy family that have this money and they spend it on a yacht. And what was it? There was and it just seems so pointless, but people are admiring it and thinking, well, it's a work of art, which in some ways it is, but it's a sort of pointless sort of thing because only one family are using it.
Exactly.
And their friends.
Yeah.
And it is.
And wonder what the carbon footprint.
Oh, there was an article by George Monbiot. Google convened a meeting of the rich and famous at the Verdura Resort in Sicily in July to discuss climate breakdown. Its delegates arrived in 114 private jets and a fleet of mega yachts, drove around the island in supercars. Even when they mean well, the ultra-rich can't help trashing the living world.
Just imagine.
And also in the same article, George says that he received a letter from a worker at a British private airport. And this is in quotes, and this guy said, I see things that really shouldn't be happening in 2019. He wrote, every day he sees Global 7000 jets, Gulfstreams, 650s and even Boeing 737s take off from the airport carrying a single passenger, mostly flying to Russia and the US. The private 737s, which are built to take 174 passengers, are filled at the airport with around 25,000 litres of fuel. That's as much as fossil energy as a small African town might use in a year.
Wow.
So,
I mean, that shame on them, honestly.
The headline was, for the sake of life on Earth, we must put a limit on wealth. It's not just the mega rich. Increased spending power leads us all to inflict environmental damage. It's time for a radical plan.
I think it's partly when you get that rich, you're finding ways to spend your money. So you're kind of being more and more elaborate, but actually it's harming the planet, which in turn is harming all of us as the human race. So they have a huge responsibility, I think.
Indeed, because this accumulation of wealth is connected to the climate. Billionaires hurt economic growth and should be taxed out of existence, says best-selling French economist Thomas Piketty. He calls for a graduated wealth tax of 5% on those worth 2 million euros or more and up to 90% on those worth 2 billion euros. Piketty says that the notion that billionaires create jobs and boost growth is false. The Profit for Purpose series that we do, the one we did with episode with Paul Lindley, the founder of Ella's Kitchen, was titled The Metrics of Success. Mm-hmm. And it's how we measure success. It isn't just money. And it comes back to the sustainable development goals and things.
Yes.
But also in our personal lives. This person is successful because they've got a mega yacht or they've got a big house. And no, not necessarily.
No. Are they happy? Is success being happy and content with your life? Or is it having a mega yacht, flying around the world and being thoroughly miserable, which I think a lot of them are?
Well, how dare you, Greta would say.
How dare you?
Oh, we were going to talk about housing as we regularly do, don't we? But there's some more research from the housing crisis affects an estimated 8.4 million people in England. This is from the National Housing Federation. Government had said that the housing was a priority and delivered 430,000 affordable homes since 2010.
I'll tell you what made me angry about this particular article. It's how politicians try to bamboozle all of us in terms of answering the questions that the National Housing Federation has posed through their research. Their retort to them was, well, yes, we're spending so much money on housing.
Because the research estimated that there were 3.6 million people living in an overcrowded home, 2.5 million were unable to afford their rent or mortgage, 2.5 million are in hidden households where they cannot afford to move out, including house shares, adults living with their parents or people living with an ex-partner. 1.27 million are in unsuitable housing, such as where older people are stuck in homes where they cannot get around. 1.4 million in poor quality homes, and then there's a 400,000 that are homeless or risk at homeless, including people sleeping rough, living in homeless shelters and temporary accommodation. So this is the crisis.
Yeah, so the issues around housing are multifaceted and manyfold. The other story that we're going to talk about was in The Independent, where the headline was children without a bed of their own or enough clothing struggle at school. The report just goes on to talk about how children particularly are affected because if they don't have a bed of their own, so they may be sharing a bed with another sibling or even their parents, and also they don't have the right type of clothing, really affects their education. And it talks about children being bullied at school because obviously if you're not wearing the right kind of trainers or the right kind of clothes, everyone's going to have a go at you. And that in turn then makes the kids not want to go to school. So then there's truancy. Yeah. And so then there's a lack of education. The cycle goes on.
And our answers to this. I've just got something else. I'm going to skip a bit here, but there was an email that came in from 38 Degrees about Maitai, the company that's outsourced to clean the UK's biggest and busiest railway stations. The situation there is that the cleaners are on very low wages, below the real living wage. So there's a campaign to sort of try and get this changed. And it's interesting, once again, Phil Bentley, who's the CEO of Maitai, he earns a few million. I think it may only be a couple of million.
Oh, only a couple of million.
When we're not paying our people enough to live off, it's just so sad. How someone can go to work every day. I don't mind. It's not the issue of how much they earn. It's just that they're employing people that do not have enough to live on, and that is just wrong.
Yeah.
The Living Wage Foundation says there's about 6 million people who are below the real living wage. So that's what you need to live off as a basic minimum. And that basic minimum adds up to about 18,000 a year. But if you're on the government living wage, that's only comes to about 16,500. So it's about a 10% increase if the people moved up. And that would make a huge difference to 6 million people.
Yeah.
To have another
and when you talk about it like that, Tom, you kind of think, well, that's doable.
I know.
That's doable. So again, you just think, get flabbergasted. I mean,
in Maitai, they could decide tomorrow, oh, sorry, we're going to give you a 10% pay rise.
Exactly. But who will do that? So this report that came out of Buttle UK, which is a children's charity.
Back to sorry, I was diverting you there.
That's okay. They talked about the impact that, living in poverty and in inadequate housing has on children and young people. And they put these things to the government. And this is what really, really irks me. And the government's response to that was, we're doing everything that we can, and our priority as a government is to tackle disadvantage. And then he goes on to say, it doesn't say who it was somebody, a spokesman for the government. And it says, the gap between disadvantaged pupils and their peers has narrowed since 2011. And 85% of children are now in good or outstanding schools. But I kind of think 85% of what? So if we look at the figures in terms of children who are being excluded from school and the children who are truancing from school, is this figure's not counted in that? So it could be 85% of anything. And so they just bamboozle us with rubbish statistics that are meaningless.
Can you hold on a minute, Satya, because I've got to let the studio cat out of the studio. It wants to go out.
The cat wants to go out now. Tell you what, the studio cats have been really good today. Maybe they know that you're not feeling so great,
I know,
Tom.
They've been looking after me.
They're looking after you. They've been quiet as anything.
They have. Okay, yes. Well, I think there's a lot of bamboozling going on and hoodwinking.
Bamboozling and hoodwinking, absolutely.
It's like politics for the privileged. Not all of them, but some really great people working really hard. But there's a lot of people, current Prime Minister included, who you feel, well, it doesn't really matter which way it goes for them. They're financially secure. And when you've got 14 million people in poverty who are not financially secure, and indeed more that are not financially secure or not, it's a tragedy, and we can't go on just messing around with people's lives, and we've got to get some action. So let's talk about action. What can people do?
I think there's lots of things that people can do because...
Our listeners, what can our listeners do?
Yeah, well, so I'll just take the example. Say we talked about climate change earlier. Extinction Rebellion did. They went out there, they were on the street, it was peaceful protest, but it made such a huge impact. Now, everybody's talking about climate change. And I think sometimes we as individuals think, oh, what little old me, what can I do? What can I do about this? But actually, if we got out there, if we joined campaigns, if we wrote to our politicians, particularly our local politicians, if we made our voices heard, that's the way to actually put pressure on our politicians to do something.
He's even talking to your friends and workmates or whatever, but in a sort of rational and calm way and a respectful way, because that's the way we'll get results, by working together. It's not I'm winning against you, or our side wants to win, and that's what I particularly feel with like parties and party conferences.
Yeah.
It's like, we're winning. There was a quote, in the Evening Standard, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, Laura Parker, the organiser for Momentum, who seems, actually, having met her, she just seems a really nice person, but I'm sure she is, but she said, words to the effect, the establishment's coming after us, but we're going to win. And I thought, well, that's very divisive. We don't want that. I'm not saying we're going to let the establishment get away with everything. So the action points, recapping on action, talk to your friends, talk to your member of parliament, not just parliament, but councillors.
Absolutely. Join local campaigns.
And join local groups.
Yes.
Because, I think it could be a political party, it could be a housing campaign group, it could be helping food banks or direct help in those in need.
Just to say that every little thing that we do, even really making ourselves more aware, educating ourselves about these things, can actually help to make a change.
That's the show for this week, the chat show, really, more of a chat show than a
It's a chat show.
Analyst. We're just having a chat, and if anyone else would like to join in anytime, you just let us know. And just a reminder, we're always looking for new people to join the team, and if you want to contact us, you can contact us at info@realagenda.org. So we hope we've woken you up a bit and that we've helped to inform, inspire you, and you'll want to get involved to make change happen. And you can look us up at realagenda.org, where you'll also find the links mentioned in the show. And just a bit more on what's up on the Real Agenda coming soon. There's now 5 series on the Real Agenda Network. Each has its own feed, so you can subscribe to one or more. There's the Real Agenda, which is the original podcast for political change. There's Around the House, where we talk to MPs about who are determined to make a difference. There's our Challenges to Change, for conversations with campaigners. And the new series, Profit for Purpose, will be in a better business, and there should be another episode out on that very soon. And I'd also just like to tell you about the new series that we're doing for Taxpayers Against Poverty. It's called Hungry, Homeless and Powerless. And the first episode of that is now out. Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, or you can get the link through the Real Agenda website, or indeed taxpayersagainstpoverty.org.uk. So, special thanks to our sponsors, the Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies. Find out why at reversemediagroup.com. So, Satya, anything else we've got to talk about today?
No, I think we've said enough, haven't we, Tom?
Is it time for biscuits?
Time for biscuits, definitely.
And a glass of wine? You're stopping for some wine?
Maybe.
Anyway, thanks a lot for listening. One thing's certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as more courageous politicians, and this is very important, who are prepared to do the right thing for people over party. It's urgent, and it's up to us to make it happen. That's the Real Agenda. So it's goodbye from Satya. I'm Tom Burgess. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.